Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. All right, welcome to episode 63 of The Expert and the Idiot. We've got Stephen Kush returning. He's going to tell us what snake is the dumbest today and what snake owner is the dumbest.
Dang, wasting no time at all. All right. No, I appreciate that. I can appreciate that.
No, I'm just messing with you, man. That was, so it's interesting. I had put that clip out when the episode first came out, and then I thought I started doing the clips again, and I was like, you know what, I got this sitting here. Let me throw it up again, and it got quite a bit more attention the second time around.
A lot more than the first time. Sheesh, I was not expecting that. Yeah,
you got in trouble.
Apparently,
yeah.
I'll say most of the people who commented on it understood the humor and somewhat agreed in a humorous way with me. Some people got pretty upset about it. So
yeah, and I mean the whole reason I put it up was because it was funny. You know, you made like kind of, you know, just a minor comment, and I kind of said I'm going to clip this, and then you just leaned into it, you know. But that was a year ago, you know. So you've changed. You've gone through personal growth.
I have. Yeah, I'm potentially a completely new person from where I was a year ago.
I think that's safe to say.
Yeah. So I don't even recognize the person I see in that clip.
That monster.
Yeah. If only he knew where he'd be. So how's things been going for the last year? What's changed? Yeah, I mean, this has been a very interesting year. Really almost entirely positive. You know, when we were sitting down a year ago, and first of all, thank you for having me back. This is, you know, quite the honor.
Yeah.
I was pretty new, and not that I'm not still now, but new to like this being my full-time profession. And I'm very fortunate to say a year later, I'm still in the same boat. So it's working well enough. Last year's breeding season was a good one for sure, but like definitely the most heartbreaking of my reptile career.
How so?
Well, so I think I've discussed this on one or two of my podcasts, but I like finally had what was going to look like my dream scrub python breeding year. That like this whole time I'm like kind of, you know, you hate to put metrics on it, but when this is all you think about constantly, you're going to have some like numbers, goals in your head. To me, it was always like, I feel like I can say I've figured this out if I have 10 clutches in a year. And I did have 10 clutches, but not really. So of those 10 females, 6 of them went egg bound. And
oh my God, dude.
I lost I like an amount of eggs that sickens me to even think about. way more than I hatched out. I had to throw away in one capacity or another. And I lost a couple females due to complications. Like it was pretty terrible. I had some incredible babies, the best barneck scrubs I've ever seen anywhere in my entire life. I hatched out last year. I got 2 new localities under my belt. So like very good things happened, but I had these kind of nightmare situations come up. Lots of infertile eggs, a few colubrid slug outs, and just, a lot of hard lessons learned. But then at the same time, I was coming off of a move where I moved in the fall and then like almost immediately started breeding stuff. And, a lot of people will say when you move, best to just take that year off of breeding. I didn't really have that luxury, but then also like all of my scrub pythons just started cycling after the moves. I'm like, I'd be kind of stupid not to breed these snakes. They're all developing their follicles. They're all going through the motions. The move definitely set them off. And I have a few other friends who have had success breeding their scrub pythons like immediately after a move. I even did it and didn't even really put 2 and 2 together until last year that my first clutch of scrub pythons essentially came right after a move, a little bit more removed, like 6 months later, but even still, or like they started breeding 6 months later. So, it kind of made me take a good hard look at like why this might be happening. What are some corners that I'm cutting, and if anything else, just like really enforced within me, like this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to put everything into. It has to be like full on, all out, my full attention. Like this is not that my life didn't already revolve around this, but like with even more specificity than I've ever done. And, getting over those hard moments took a while. But then, when babies started hatching out, makes a lot of that feel better. And then, I still to this day don't know what caused this egg binding problem, because, a breeder has a few go egg bound a year. You kind of just, okay, they're snakes, they do that. When it's over 50%, something happened. That's not a coincidence. And I've talked to the brightest and best minds in python breeding about this, and there's no consensus. No one's ever seen those types of numbers. So there was a few potential culprits that, no one could say, oh, it's definitely this, it's definitely that. Maybe some of these had to do with the issue. So I just was decided like, I'm just going to fix all of them and let's see what happens. That's all I can do is address all of these potential factors that are going into this. If it doesn't work, then I know that I did everything I could. And if it does work, then great. So
what I gotta know what are the potential factors? What do you think was causing this?
For sure. So a few things. The first one that came up that again, I'm not sure if this was it or not, was my water quality. So and I think less than water quality was a change in water quality that the animals were getting. So back when I lived in Indiana, the property that I was on a well. I mean, the water, you just couldn't use the water for snakes. So we would get like bottles of distilled water delivered every other week. And that's what I was using for my snakes. There's not a whole lot going on in that water, not a lot of mineral content, good or bad. And then I moved to Texas, and there's pretty hard water in Texas as well, the city water. I have like the top of the line countertop filter that I use for myself, and I was using it for the snakes. And
they don't do shit, son.
This one is not no Brita filter. It's pretty good, but
okay.
but definitely not enough. So like if a water bowl dried out, like with my rattlesnakes in particular, some of them have like little 2-ounce deli cups where I fill them every week if I'm a day late. Which you could have a banded rock rattlesnake without water for 2 months and it's not going to care. Not that I ever do that. They're not sensitive animals, so the little cups go dry and there's crystallization at the bottom. And I never had that with the distilled water, for obvious reasons. And even with this filtered water, it was still happening. So I basically ended up going back to buying reverse osmosis water for the most part. I'll throw in some, like alkaline water, or even every now and then use that filtered water just so some minerals are entering their system, but almost entirely switched over to the reverse osmosis water. And I think that's been very helpful in general. I think another factor was that some of my adult female scrub pythons had a little bit too much weight on them. And not because I was feeding them in a way that I think would have been too much, but some of the females the year before, I had fed them up for breeding. They didn't go. And I continued to feed them when they had this extra weight on them. And now I'm just packing even more weight on top of a snake that's already been fed up for breeding. So like I have females this year that I fed up to breed. They didn't go. They reabsorbed their follicles, whatever. Between now and the end of the year, they maybe will see 3 rats, maybe. And previously, before I had these issues, they were maybe eating every 3 or 4 weeks. A female in that situation. So that's not a heavy food schedule, but for a snake that already has extra weight that it didn't lose by having a clutch, you're just doing more. I've now learned you're doing a whole lot more harm than good than continuing to feed that girl a lot. So last summer, substantially cut down on my feeding on my adults, not the ones that had laid and that I had to, get weight back onto them. But even then I went a lot slower with those females. People have bred scrub pythons back-to-back years. I have plenty of friends who have done that. I have never had successful back-to-back clutches. I've had females lay in back-to-back years where my first instance was a good clutch followed by a bad clutch, and then second instance was a slug out followed by a good clutch. So never back-to-back good clutches. And I have enough of these snakes to where I don't need to push them to go back-to-back years. So I really think going forward, I'm probably never going to do that. So I can kind of have the recovery after that clutch be a more extended process because I'm not rushing that snake to do anything. They have an entire year after their next cool down to get back up to condition to have another clutch. And ultimately, that's probably better for them anyway. So substantially cut down on feeding and particularly monitoring females that I fed up for breeding the previous year that didn't go. That was another thing. And then the third thing was my heating. So
real quick, with the feeding, what does it look like now? How are you feeding now? Like how are you feeding when you're feeding? When are you cycling them off food? How does that look right now?
Sure. So right now, basically, let's just take this year as an example, that this breeding season starting at the fall. So over the summer, I was kind of being a little bit more sparing with my feeding. And then come fall time, before I cut the food off and started to cool the temps, I gave them like 2 or 3 meals with a little bit more frequency, like every other week, every third week, something like that. And then they had 3 full months off of food. And then, some females started developing in that process. Most of them did not. I am having a later season than I did last year by a substantial amount.
Is that because the weather change?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people. So like January or so, I was having sleepless nights. I was kind of like, what is happening? I thought I had improved my process, and there's nothing happening with these snakes. But after talking to some friends, some breeders, people on the podcast as well, I'm like, okay, everyone's having a late year. I need to calm down a little bit. I gave it a little time. Females started developing. I'm like, all right, I need to let them do their thing. I've done what I can do. Now it's in their hands, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And
they don't have hands.
They don't have hands. It's in their scales.
It's in their coils.
It's in their prehensile tails. There we go. They can grab things with their prehensile tails. I have a lot of prehensile tailed snakes. So, and once they've started their follicular development, I know what I can do to support that process as the keeper. That's still the thing that I don't know how to trigger that follicular development. That's the ultimate question mark for me at this point. And I think I'm not alone in that, but particularly with the scrub pythons, once they have their follicles, I'm getting a pretty good handle on how that progresses, and then what I think is the best way to feed them through that process, their ovulation, the timing between that, pre-lay shed, eggs, all that stuff, their behaviors, how they change, how their colors change, all that stuff. I feel like I'm getting a good handle on it. The triggering follicular development is still a 100% mystery to me. But as long as they do it, doesn't really matter when they do it. I'd love to be able to have that trick in the in the belt, in the tool belt as well. But maybe one day I'll get there. But the third thing was the heating. So last year I kind of, and I did this more or less because I was still settling in from my move, and I didn't have the ability to monitor stuff as closely just because I was still chaotic, getting cages built, room set up, the house organized, all this stuff. I mean, moving in took me the better part of probably 6 or 7 months to get everything fully. I mean, honestly, some aspects, the better part of a year. So, now I'm actually able to give more attention than I was, but I had more of a lower temperature, steady heat source on these snakes just because I didn't want to overheat them and not have the time to be checking on them constantly. So I changed that to a shorter window, more intense heat. And then I've seen, more natural basking behaviors. It's kind of taught me what they'll do at different parts of their cycle. Once I see them, because scrub pythons in general, I have found don't bask all that much in general. Males will almost never bask. And then, if a female is not developing follicles, she's not really going to bask either. So that's been quite the metric for me to use as far as, where these girls are at in their cycles. I palpate my females. I don't leave it up to chance of I think I see swelling or they're doing this or doing that. I just take them out. Boom, 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 boom. They either have follicles or they don't. And I was very fortunate. One of my early mentors in reptiles was very, very good at palpating, and he taught me how to do it. I was probably 13 or 14 years old. So wow. I've just had a lot of reps on it, lots of different species, venomous, colubrids, pythons and boas. So it's something that I feel very, very confident with. And I can palpate a snake and probably guess within 3 or 4 millimeters how big those follicles are. So, and that also, that tells you where they are, how fast they're growing. With scrub pythons, like a species like that, where they go through a color change when they become gravid, that's also helpful because you can correlate the follicle size with their color compared to their normal state and have a really good idea of where things are going. Wow. So, kind of all of that stuff.
So what did your heating sort of set up look like, and what does it look like now? How did it change?
So as you kind of, anyone who's watching the video see behind me, I have all radiant heat panels, which if I was to make that choice now, I wouldn't, but I have them. I've spent more money on them than I should have, and I'm going to make them work, at least for a little while. So
why do you say you wouldn't use them now?
To me, it just seems that everything points towards bulbs being a better heat source, more concentrated. It's a more natural basking behavior for them, where these snakes in the wild aren't sitting on a big rock and their entire body's getting blasted with heat. It's just not happening. They're sticking a coil out in, early afternoon, midday, where a portion of their body is going to get heated, travels throughout their body. They're going to duck back into the canopy. These little panels behind me, I prefer them much more over the big panels, but I have some of the larger panels as well that, take up like a quarter of the space of the top of the enclosure. So I just do a more limited period during the day with a ramp up, ramp down kind of thing, and then fully cut off at night.
What are those cage dimensions behind you?
Those are 4x2x2 behind me.
Okay. Those are for smaller reference.
Yeah, those are just smaller, young adult scrub pythons.
Okay. So sorry, I kind of derailed you there. So how was your heating set up, and how is it set up now?
Yeah. So, I mean, the setup itself was the same, but it was a more constant, lower temperature during the day, still on at night, not as warm, but still on to supplement the ambient temperature in there, which I'm not doing this year, and I think has been helping me immensely. And then using ramping periods where they're not just coming on, coming off. And then, like I said, during the day when they do have the basking spot, it's hotter. And when they'll utilize it for a shorter period of time, which I think is much more of a natural behavior instead of sitting there all day trying to get to that temperature that they want to, not being able to achieve it because it's not being provided.
So how long, what is the temperature peaking at, and how long is it at that?
So,
for like, what's the window?
Yeah, it depends on where the females are in their development. It's really not very hot up until they have like substantial follicles, probably around 20 millimeters. And like, I can tell that they're growing. Because up to that point, they're really not utilizing that basking spot. So up until then, it really is like supplementing the ambient more or less, where that heat spot might be like 86 degrees. But like I said, they're hardly even using it anyway. And then once their behavior is going to switch to where they are going to bask, they can probably get, they're sitting right under the spot, 90 to 95. Probably certain little pockets even more than that. And they'll utilize that for a shorter period of time, and then go back down, into their nest box or under their shelves to get to cool off, so thermoregulate, stuff like that.
Right on. I want to go back to the water quality thing because I recently got an under the sink reverse osmosis system.
Okay, cool.
And it's worth every penny. I was getting distilled water and using distilled water for misting, so there wouldn't be water spots and cleanup down the road, which is horrendous.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to use vinegar to break down that hard water, something acidic. And I would also use it in my humidifier. So I'm on well water, and anybody can go get one of these. And I strongly advise that you do. There's a TDS meter on Amazon, and that is a hardness meter for the water. And they are $17. They're like $16.99. Like, there's no reason not to have it.
Yeah.
It'll also, I think you can check the pH and the temperature of the water.
Oh,
okay. And it's fairly accurate.
Wow.
Maybe not the pH, definitely the temperature. But so I had a water filter that I thought was the shit. Right. And I was running my well water through it, and I tested the hardness before and after, and it basically removed zero hardness.
Oh.
Basically zero, right? So as I change my water out once a week, as my I had this white mineral ring around where the water line was in the bowls, right? Yeah. And total pain in the ass to try to scrub that out. It kind of looks trashy. So so my hardness sits around a 400 plus, and what's normal? Like you would, so if you got your TDS meter, you'd have to just check and see like what's your tap water and kind of gauge it from there. But you can actually test and see how well your water filter is working on reducing the hardness of the water and changing that. So you can check all your water, you can put samples, and that's what I ended up doing. So my water softener itself doesn't really change the hardness of the water that much. It's adding salt, which actually adds more minerals. Yeah. So the hardness profile might change, but the hardness itself might stay the same. Got it. Okay. And then I have the RO now, and that'll bring that 400 number down to like a 20.
Yeah, sure.
So it's damn near distilled water.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about the mineral content being lacking, because we're feeding these animals whole prey items. We're giving them these whole prey items with bone and everything. So I'm not too concerned about that personally.
Yeah. I mean, and people use all sorts of different water for their reptiles. I mean, people use straight well water for their snakes and have no problem. I think for me, with the issues. And I think another factor that's a complete intangible was the fact that I had just moved them, and not even that I had just moved all the snakes. When I got into my new house, I still had to renovate my garage. So these snakes were just sitting in the living room in their cages without heat for like over a month, which was like the time that I would have cooled them down, but like with almost no humidity because I'm in the desert. And, you know, it was very hard to maintain that. So like that period of time could have caused some sort of internal thing where it screwed them up for the foreseeable future until they kind of recovered from that, got back to a normal life, you know, cycle. So, you know, that's a factor that I really can't account for completely, because how do you quantify that? But then I think potentially the switch in water from the distilled to the kind of hard filtered tap water may have been what was even worse than the tap water to begin with, which is the fact that they were used to this, pretty benign mineral less water, and now all of a sudden they're hit with all of this, and it kind of screwed their system up. So
it's weird because like you could totally see the logic in that it would be beneficial for egg development, right?
yeah,
Calcium,
sure.
you know. Huh. Well, that is crazy. So you lost 50% of the clutches. You said they were egg bound.
So I didn't. And the thing was, all the females, they did the same thing. They cleared the first oviduct, and the second oviduct was twisted. So I got partial clutches from all of them. They didn't all make it through the incubation, but so the 4 clutches that were laid properly got babies from all of them, and then 2 of the 6 egg bound clutches I got babies from. But as far as like fertile eggs that were laid, I mean, I maybe lost up to 70% of them, maybe 60%. Like,
jeez,
a heartbreaking amount. So, but what are you going to do? I still had I had my best year on scrub pythons by a factor of 2. So I can't really complain, but yeah, that was a hard one a hard lesson to learn. So,
and you lost animals due to this?
Yeah, I did. I lost a couple of females. Yeah.
So what does that look like? Like, when do you identify that a female is egg bound? Does she go to lay eggs and then she thinks, okay, I'm done, but you palpate her and you know that she still has eggs, and then like, did you have a vet? How do you handle that from that point on?
Yeah, so that's exactly what happens. They are coiled around their clutch like they're done, with half of their clutch still in them, and it's very obvious. You don't need to palpate them to see. It's like you just see this giant mass in them at one point. You're like, all right, well, she's still got something in her. The first female that went egg bound, I did take to the vet, and they quoted me the most ridiculous amount for surgery, and then I just told them, like, yeah, I've paid a quarter of that in the past. They came back and they knocked half the price off. I'm like, screw you guys. I left. That female I ended up getting all of the eggs out of her on my own later on anyway.
Oh, wow.
So
how did you do that?
So I treated each individual differently, with the help of some friends who have dealt with this in the past. Once they were done laying and it was like, okay, they're absolutely egg bound. My first move was to try to just palpate the eggs out, and that definitely worked on a handful of them. But I always got to the point where there was the twist in the oviduct, and then it was obviously done. It was almost like there was like knotted on itself or adhered to the side of its body. It's something inside the body. So, and each situation I kind of treated differently based on what the snake was showing me. So for that first female that I took to the vet, they were stuck. I could not get those things to move. And a month and a half later, they just weren't stuck anymore. No rhyme or reason. I had her out for cleaning one day, and I was like, let's try. And I just started pushing the first egg. I'm like, oh, this is moving. Popped it out. 10 later, they were all out.
Wow.
And she didn't really care. This is not a particularly calm female that I had. And they all went out, put her back, fed her a few days later, and she was just kind of, all right, it's time to recover again. I had
So she
3,
had those eggs in her for an additional 4 weeks.
maybe even more. Yeah.
And were you just like stressed out about that? Like when
I-
like when do eggs that are retained cause an issue? At what point?
It's very case by case. I mean, I've heard of snakes retain eggs for multiple years and even lay clutches around retained eggs. So it really depends. I had one of the females that I lost. I believe what probably happened. She had one retained egg. She was not that big of a female. She had a lot of eggs and they were pretty small. Like she had like 18 small eggs. I lost the entire clutch, and the very last one was stuck in its original place. So like basically like the midway point of her body. And it probably ruptured and went septic, if I had to guess. Because this mass of where the egg was kind of kept growing, and she was not looking good. It happened pretty quickly too. So like in that instance, that's not going to go well, obviously. But then like one of the females, I cleared the first oviduct, and then one was stuck, and it was like really, really stuck. So like on a couple females, I was able to like push the oviduct out a bit, poke like a little hole in it, and then push the eggs out of the hole in the oviduct. And then it's kind of brutal. I had a couple of females that actually lost oviducts in the process. But according to the Python whisperer himself, Mr. Ryan Young, they can fully reproduce with one oviduct. They just have half of a clutch. And these females that lost that oviduct, they're still fine. I mean, one's literally right next to me begging me for a rat right now. They're doing just fine. They just have one oviduct now. So, but then this female that I was mentioning before I lost track of myself, the oviduct was so twisted and so thick right at the vent that I was not getting that out. I wasn't making a hole in it to push an egg. I just kind of let her do her thing. And then like 2 months later, there's an egg on the ground. A couple weeks after that, there's another egg on the ground. A week later, the last one's out, and she just got him out on her own eventually. Whatever that was resolved itself inside of her, and she pushed him out. So
do you think that avoiding the vet could have been better in some cases, or do you like? I mean, what direction do you go in thinking about that scenario? Do you think that it was good that a lot of it was resolved on its own? Or do you think that surgery should be done, swiftly?
I don't think surgery necessarily needs to be done swiftly. I mean, the likelihood of hatching an egg that the female didn't lay on her own is almost zero. So even if you push it out yourself 10 minutes later, just the process of the female actually laying that egg, that applies some like protective coating under the egg that helps with it, something. As I learned last year. Of course, Ryan said that he's hatched eggs that he's pushed out himself, but we can't all be Ryan Young. But
he's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, sorry, I'm not you. I don't know what to do with myself. But I wouldn't necessarily say better if your vet's not good at the procedure and messes up some internal tissues and whatnot that creates a lot of scarring. You could end that animal's breeding life. Not that this incident wouldn't potentially do that to begin with, but like the first female that went egg bound, the one that I said eventually I just got all the eggs out later. That was her second time going. The first time she got egg bound as well. That was my first time ever dealing with an egg bound. Actually, no, I take that back. Like a bad egg bound snake the first time. And she did get surgery. And it was like great procedure by a vet who had done it many, many times. You couldn't even see the scar eventually. And the next year she developed like 20 giant follicles. And I was like, I can't breed you this year. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. So then I knew that the following year, which was last year, she was going to be off to the races, and she was. So based on what had happened after, because when she got egg bound, I was like, all right, I knew this was a risk. She had laid 6 good eggs, maybe 8, something like that. But she had laid like what would have been a good small clutch from like a young female. She was a really big female, so she had 10 left in her. So I was like, all right, I guess she went egg bound. Like my first female of the year laid a good clutch. The second one was that female that had done it before. The third clutch was good as well. And then the fourth one was egg bound again. I'm like, this is strange. The fifth one was egg bound. I think the sixth one was as well. And I'm like, what is happening? Mm. So like that one didn't even necessarily tip me off that I had a more systemic problem going on. But kind of to get back to the actual question, I think it really depends on the situation. I don't think any of them necessarily had their situation improved by not having surgery.
It was just a different way to go about it.
Yeah, probably the only female that I would say benefited from not having surgery was the one that I said just like push the egg out a couple months later, push another one out, because she didn't lose an oviduct, she didn't get cut into, nothing like that. So if there's any female from the year that I think benefited from patience, was probably her. But the other ones either lost oviducts or like it was bad. And and I'm also here like, man, I've put all these snakes through this, and now look what happened. Like I felt super guilty about it, that these females had to go through this hellish process. So It was hard to see these animals going through it as well, and just wanting to do what's best for them, but not really knowing exactly what that would be. Now all of the females that all made it, they're doing great. So, these things are, these are resilient animals, and their bodies are meant to heal themselves. So give them the right parameters, give them good nutrition, and they're going to do a lot of what you go to a vet for on their own, just in more time.
So what are you looking at now for this year? What are like, how many clutches have you had? Successes, how you said everything is looking really positive this year.
Yeah. So, as we've talked about, and I've said on some podcast, I'm a little bit superstitious about talking about specifics before babies are on the ground. But I guess I'll say what I feel like I'm comfortable with.
Sure.
Breeding season is in full swing right now. I definitely have eggs in the incubator, multiple species, multiple gravid females. Things are looking really good. I'm probably going to have a pretty solid, the year that I've been hoping for with my rattlesnakes. So like things are definitely looking good. I've not had an egg binding incident yet this year, knock on wood. So everything has gone as far as, delivery the way you'd want it to. Which makes me think that one of those factors, or all of them in concert, were the issue last year. And then maybe even just some more time to settle into their new environment has helped all of this correct itself. I just, my goal is for this to be my best breeding season I've had, so far in my breeding career to date. And that's across the board, venomous colubrids, pythons. Hopefully with scrub pythons, I can, just keep improving every year. That's really my only goal, is to be able to say every year that I did a little better than last year. I figured out something that I didn't have figured out the year before. Just I don't want to go sideways. And I could have a year with less babies and think I had a better year because because of one aspect or the other. I mean, just alone this year, if the females can go through delivering their clutches and not have any sort of health implications on themselves, that's a success to me. If all my females can make it out of the year in good health, like I'm thrilled. So that's and so far it's been working out that way. Hopefully with the scrub pythons, I can add some new species and localities to the list that I've been able to breed so far, and hopefully some stuff that is pretty uncommon in captivity that, can go to some of the right people to ensure the future of these snakes in the hobby and in captivity. So that's kind of where I'm at this point. Just kind of doing all I can, trying to support these snakes through the process, and hopefully hatch out some incredible babies.
Hell yeah. Well, I can't ask you that. Well, we'll have to do a part 3.
Yes, for sure.
When things start hatching out.
Yeah.
So feeders and nutrition. Are you breeding all your own feeders?
Not all, but a majority. So, we're breeding mice and African soft furs, and then now, as of very recently, quail. No rats though, just for obvious reasons. It's such a space, time commitment. Not really as much time, but space. I'm not going to do them in the house. The quail are in a couple cages in the backyard that are pretty easy. The Coturnix quail can live outside year round. Button quail have to come inside for cold nights in the winter. So, in like one cage of each, that's not very bad. And, that's going to be pretty prolific once they get going as far as producing some feeders. So, but like with
do you have to incubate their eggs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's like 30 days or something like that, or even less for the button quail, I think. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. And I think that something like they lay like an egg a day. Brooke is the one handling the quail. I'm just kind of sitting here looking at them every now and then. So I don't know nearly as much about them as I should, but I know she does. So I feel comfortable that they're in her hands. But that's going to be a great supplement to what I'm doing too. But yeah, I'm still buying rats.
Do you think that having like day old quail live will be a good way to get baby scrubs started? Is
Sure.
that like a potential thing?
Yeah, I sure hope so. Day old quail. I mean, even frozen thawed that are heated up in hot water. That's, to me, so far, I would say the best trick, so to speak, to get a picky feeder to get going is on day old quail or button quail. I've actually never fed off button quail before. They're kind of expensive. You buy them in the retail market. So, being able to produce my own would have been really the only way that I would feel comfortable going about it. And also I prefer doing it this way anyway. So, but yeah, so, I mean, the mice and the soft furs, pretty much everything I need from, obviously a day old pinky through like maybe a third to half of my small rat needs are accounted for by that breeding. And then, just buying the bigger rat sizes for stuff as needed. So
What's the largest rat size you need for the animals you have?
I mean, really just like a jumbo rat. I have some big scrub pythons that can take larger meals. I just don't see a purpose in it on a regular basis. Every now and then, just to kind of throw some variety at them, it's not a problem, or give them a little bit of a challenge. But yeah, really just jumbo rats. At this point, I don't buy any colossal mammoth, none of that stuff. So.
And what are you guys doing for nutrition for your feeders? Like, how are you, is that like a top priority for you?
It is the top priority. Yeah, 100%. So I got to give a shout out to my buddy out here in El Paso, Kyle Vargas. He's a Club King on Instagram. He has been breeding mice and, now soft furs for a while. I mean, basically as long as he's been keeping snakes, and he's always used like a naturalistic diet for them. He discussed it a little bit on the podcast that he was on with me about a month ago. So yeah, I'm doing kind of a similar thing to what he's doing, a mix of a bunch of different nuts, seeds, grains, bugs and fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. And then kind of the quail are being treated in a similar fashion, just a little bit more tailored to them. Not as many big seeds and whatnot, but then maybe a little heavier on the bugs and stuff like that. And but yeah, that's like, to me, the most important aspect of what I'm doing here in general is the nutrition of those feeders. I think it, I know it to the snakes directly in
Mm.
a very substantial way.
Have you noticed a difference?
Yeah, I mean, in growth rate of babies is astonishing,
Mm.
and not even just that they're growing faster; they're growing faster with like proper proportions. They're not getting fatty and weird. Their colors are vibrant. Like they just look so healthy. Um,
Mm.
and then like with some of my adults, like my
Just the words fatty and weird. Like I'm just picturing like a fat, weird baby snake.
well, I mean, you'll see it with like ball pythons sometimes. People who really power feed their young ball pythons, and they're like a ball python that has the proportions of an adult blood python. You're like, what the heck is that thing? And the thing's not a year old. Like it's been eating every other day for its whole life so far. Um,
Yeah.
and what I've also found is that one meal goes a long way. Um, so I'm not necessarily feeding very frequently, but when they're getting meals, they're getting these really nutritional, like nutrient packed meals and like the bigger mice, they're not fat. Like they're big, but they're appropriate sized, and their body structure, in my opinion, is like exactly what I'd want to feed to my snakes. So like when I retire breeders, I'm thrilled because I'm like, I get a bigger meal now and it's healthy. Like this is awesome. So not just kind of like a fat pudgy jumbo mouse. They're lean and muscular. Um, so yeah, I mean, it goes a long way. With my like adult rattlesnakes and stuff like that, I don't need to feed them all that frequently for them to, you know, have the right body condition to them. Um,
How
so
often does one feed a rattlesnake?
depends on the rattlesnake, really. I mean, I have my blacktail rattlesnakes. Some of my adults shoot. So I brumate them for a good bit. Like they won't eat from like early October until like early March.
Wow.
Um, and then in between that time, some of them I might feed them 4 times. So yeah, sometimes very infrequently. With some of my smaller species like the banded rock rattlesnakes, ridge nose, and stuff like that. You know, my big adults, I'll feed them every 3 weeks on average, but that's not like a really strict schedule. Stuff that I'm raising up might get every other week just so I can get some more growth on them, stuff like that. So
Now, where are you sourcing their food from? And are they getting any pellets at all, or is it all nuts and fruits and veggies and everything?
yeah, so there's like a local feed store here that I'm getting like a bulk of like the seeds, nuts, and grain from, and then buying some of the stuff from Amazon, stuff from the grocery store, just kind of here and there where it comes from. Um, we have these like hay pellet mixtures. We also they always have like Timothy hay in the tubs with them. They'll eat that. They'll use it to nest, all that type of stuff. They have these hay pellets. They're like a mix of like Timothy, alfalfa, some other hays. And they'll nibble on it, but not a whole lot. It's more
Mm.
of a supplement to their diet, if anything. The soft furs will just shred it up for fun, and then it'll just be all strewn about the bedding. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as any sort of like processed rodent diet, they're getting none whatsoever.
Wow. That's interesting. I'm raising rabbits now,
Okay.
and we're just getting like an organic feed for them from the Tractor Supply,
Yeah.
and and they get Timothy hay as well. But kind of like what you said, it's like when you first put it in, they'll eat it, but after like 6 hours, then they just mess with it until it's all over the place,
Yeah.
and it's just this giant mess.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we had one male and 4 females, and the male died.
Oh shit.
So
That's nice.
yes, well, fortunately, we have 9 of his babies.
Okay.
So yeah, we have some males to hold back,
Nice.
and but yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I don't think I could do mice or rats. Just the smell, and I don't even know where I'd be able to keep them.
Says the guy who has rabbits.
Yeah, but they're outside.
True. That is
You
true.
know,
Yeah.
they're outside,
I
and
mean, the mice aren't bad at all. The rats are different. Mice are like the neatest, most like low waste. I mean, for a rodent, obviously. I mean, I have them in a closet in one of my venomous rooms. Like they're in the house.
Mm.
And what's nice about that room is my venomous are like high elevation species, all of them. So the rooms stay cool. So that keeps the rodents in check as well, that they're in an air conditioned room. But
How
like,
cool is that room?
uh, during the winter, like I'll have to even like close the closet doors where they are, because they'll get too cold actually. Like over to the night, the coldest time of the year, they'll get even into the upper 40s sometimes in there, but like generally like 52 to 55,
Jesus.
and then maybe upwards close to 60 during the day at the highest during the winter. But like over the summer, like right now, for instance, it's still getting into like the low to mid 60s at night, but then the room that they're in will get into the mid 70s during the day and then drop back down at night. So
Okay. That's fucking bananas that it's in the 40s.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe a couple of really, really cold nights, but yeah, low 50s for sure.
So you could keep diamond pythons in there.
Yeah, absolutely. If I
That'd be
had
cool.
diamonds, that would be that would be where they'd go. Same with Bolins,
Yeah,
where they go. Yeah.
that's awesome. Do you plan on getting Bolins?
Yeah, 100%. Exactly when, couldn't tell you, but for sure. I've wanted those snakes over. I wanted Bolins before everyone wanted Bolins. So they're the real Highland scrub python. So that's what I need them. I need them bad.
Yeah, for sure. What is there anything that you, aside from Bolins, that you want but you don't have?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a bunch of stuff. I would say most of that list would be taken up by colubrids. Yeah, I'm a huge colubrid nut, and there are just so many. I mean, there are literally the better part of 3,000 colubrid species. So you're never, someone could be Ryan Young or Nick Mutton or the Barkers and have all the pythons. That's quite the goal to achieve, but it's somewhat reasonable based on the number of species of pythons. You can't do that with colubrids. Most of those species aren't even really known by science, nonetheless, captivity. So yeah, that I mean, I guess I'll preface this by saying, like, I couldn't be happier with my collection. I have, and this is going to might sound arrogant. I don't think it is. I have my favorite collection in the world. I don't think
Yeah,
that's
that's fine.
necessarily the best or whatever, but like from
Yeah,
what I like, there's no collection that I look at as better than mine for my taste.
sure.
And to me, I think that's where we should all aspire to be, is like, I wouldn't rather be in anyone else's shoes than my own with my animals. Um, so like, I don't really have much of a need to get more stuff. There's certainly more animals that I do want, but like, I don't need to do it quickly or anything. The Bolins are definitely that. Yeah, a lot of different colubrid species. From all over the world, North American stuff, South American, Central, Southeast Asian species, maybe a couple of African species in there,
Do you
North
like
Asian
Cribos?
species. Say that again.
Do you like Cribos?
Yeah, I like Cribos. I like Indigos more than Cribos, but I definitely am a Cribo fan. No, no question. I've never kept any Cribos.
Have
But
you ever kept any indigos?
I have. I bred Mexican Indigos one time. I used to have them, and I ended up selling them as part of trying to fund. It was either more scrubs or more rattlesnakes. But the red phase Mexican Indigos in particular are one that I definitely am going to have again at some point. Um, but like some of the, like the Gonyosoma, like the Jansen's rat snakes or the royal tree snakes. I mean, some of the North Asian stuff, like the Japanese rats, the Korean rats, the Russian rats. I think those snakes are just so incredible and underrated. Um, Stuff like the copper rat snakes are amazing. The 100 flower rats, mandarins, bamboo rats. I used to keep those. Like, there's just so many different colubrids, and even like the North American stuff. I love Pituophis. I need more pine
Mm.
snakes and bull snakes, gophers. I already have a pretty good collection of them, and I definitely want more. I love some Honduran milk snakes and black milk snakes. Like,
Oh yeah, I love
you
black
know,
milks.
if I ever decide to like scale this up at all, that's where it would be with colubrids. That would be where it is. And not only because they're, um, they're prolific. They're one of the easier types of snakes to breed. It's you can have 100 species of most colubrids in one room, keep them the same way, breed them the same way. They're all going to do the same thing. You can't really do that with like a lot of pythons or boas. A lot of them have specific needs that you can't overlap. For me, I'd rather have a pair of 50 species of colubrid than 50 pairs of two species, or you know what I'm saying. So that'd be that for me. There's some venomous that I still want. Very few though. Most of them would be just kind of like really rare Mexican rattlesnake species that like maybe one day I'll be able to acquire them.
You don't have any elapids?
No, I do not, and I feel no inclination to.
Why not?
Whatsoever. They're just not for me. I mean, what I get out of my colubrids from a physicality standpoint is what you would get out of elapids in a package that's not going to kill you really fast. Like, and I have plenty of venomous snakes, so I'm not, that's not why, but just the way that they behave. And then as a generality, the more neurotoxic venom compositions of elapids definitely they scare the shit out of me, as they should scare the shit out of everybody. I've been around plenty of elapids. I have friends who have big elapid collections, so like I can get my elapid fix from a safe close distance if I really need to. But like my tiger rat snakes, they are just non-venomous mambas. It's what they are from like a physicality standpoint, and that's not for me. That's from the mouths of mamba keepers. So and in my opinion, they're much more beautiful. Not that mambas aren't beautiful, but I like tiger rats better. So like my elapid needs are all covered by colubrids.
What about like a little monocle cobra?
I'd rather sell my entire collection than get a monocle. This is my hot take of the day. Monocle cobras are terrible.
That's so dramatic.
I'm very passionate against monocle cobras.
Why? Are they the dumbest of all the elapids?
Well, yes, actually. And I will cite evidence. There's a video that most people have probably seen. It's gone viral all over Facebook and stuff like that. It was of Terry Phillip, the curator of Reptile Gardens, feeding a rack of monocle cobras. And what's so amazing about the video is just how like calm and collected Terry is doing it. I mean, most people who watch the video don't know that this is like one of the foremost reptile professionals who's ever lived. He just looks like some dude who's feeding cobras in the video. But like what strikes me is not about how calm he is. It's about how out of control these monocle cobras are. Like they don't bite their food. They'll strike everywhere. They'll flail. They'll run around. They'll run back in the rack. And the last thing they'll do is bite the rat that's 2 inches from their face. I cannot stand that kind of chaos in a snake. I like a scrub python. They key in on the rat, they fly across the cage, and no hesitation, they grab it right in the spot they need to. If I were to keep cobras, monocle cobra would be the last species of cobra that I would ever keep.
So I did see that video. And this is, I did see that video, and it is quite comical, and especially his level of tranquility is just madness. But this will kind of lead us into another subject, which I kind of want to get your thoughts on.
Sure.
They're in like these are decent sized cobras, and they're in pretty small tubs, right? So it has to make you wonder. And I recently talked to Stephen Tillis about this.
Okay.
If an animal is always in a tub and they're not getting any enrichment or anything that makes them think, aren't they going to be less intelligent than an animal that is in an enriching environment? And I mean, if you want to throw the human spin on this, which I'll gladly do, put a human in a room with no books, no information, nothing at all, just in a concrete cell, and then expect them to come out and be intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably something to it. I think that's data that's really, really hard to quantify. I know there have been studies, I think, on like ball pythons and racks, and I think anecdotal, and not even anecdotally, but like the early results that we're getting from these studies are showing that yeah, there's definitely something to it. I think it really depends on the species. Uh, for instance, like I think if you kept a tiger rat snake in a CV70 tub, like that's abuse. Uh, uh, you know, a Fayeri king snake, I don't think that's bad at all. Um,
Mm.
any sort of like more fossorial species. Personally, I love. I'll start by saying I hate solid color tubs, and I love the tubs that have windows in the front. Um, and then as clear as a tub can be as possible, still get a light cycle. I think that's the way to go. I'll use crystal clear tubs when I can. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to it. I think having the ability to have natural behavior patterns of heat, light availability, stuff like that, temperature swings. Um, I would love to see what the data show going forward of studies like that. But yeah, obviously it makes sense that an animal that's in a more enriched environment will have a more developed brain than one that's not. Um,
Sure.
but I think the real question is to what extent and to what effect does that have on the animal?
Yeah.
Those are just answers that I don't have, and I don't think we can really make strong judgments before we have that data, because otherwise, and that's just kind of like a anthropomorphizing type of mindset, which is important for some things because there's just kind of probably general standards of what's cruelty and what's not that you can't just dismiss because this is a reptile. But you can analysis paralysis yourself without actual data. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, and not even, I'm not even bringing up the point of like, is it cruelty? The thing that makes me curious is an animal that's in a tub going to have less intellect than an animal that's in an enriched environment,
yeah,
with textures and
yeah, sure.
opportunities to, express behavior.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see it. And another thing that'll be interesting is how long does it take for that decline to occur if it does? Because I have plenty of snakes that are in cages that were raised in tubs, and I don't know the difference. Um, and what's the difference between tubs that don't allow light in versus tubs that do allow light in? Bedding versus paper or
Hmm.
whatever. Uh, you know, Leaf litter, hides, whatever, however you may dress up that tub. Um, what difference does it make? And inevitably, it's probably it's going to be something. It's just a matter of exactly what that something is. That I think is the interesting question.
Yeah, and another thing too is if your tub is as big as the cage you would keep the animal in, then what are you arguing against? Like if you're against tubs, right? And if the tub is the same size and has a window in the front, like you're saying,
Yeah,
then why even argue against that, right? Then
sure.
it just comes down to personal preference.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
kind of
I think
getting
the only
into.
the only thing you could really begin to argue about that would be just some of the lighting and heating elements you could use in a cage setup that you can't necessarily use in a rack. But it's just because racks aren't designed that way. Like I have some racks
Yeah.
for my rattlesnakes that I designed, and then a friend of mine custom built them. They have back heat. They have like the big Cambro tubs, and they have LED lights in the top, and they're open top. So like there's screen tops with LED lights. Basically, just a bunch of cages stacked on top of each other in a rack system. If that's what racks were, we might not even have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
That's just not, racks weren't designed for the animals, pure and simple. They were designed for us. Um, I'll particularly shout out to Freedom Breeder. I think that they're pushing the envelope more than any other manufacturers on innovating their racks for both reptiles and for rodents, particularly for rodents. Actually, some of the stuff that they've done is really groundbreaking. Um,
How so?
like the biggest thing that they have done that I'm like, this is why has no one done this yet? For anyone who's bred rodents, especially rats, the thing that'll make you want to jump off of your roof the fastest are the chewed water lines. A rat will escape, and those little rubber water lines, they're not very strong, especially to rat teeth that can get through concrete with enough persistence. And you walk in the morning, and water has flooded out every tub below that line spot in the rack. Or if this rat's really proficient, it's chewed every line on the rack, and now you have to spend all day replacing it. You've lost animals in the process. I mean, it's disgusting, frankly. Like, it's terrible. They've created these stainless steel water line enclosures to where the line, they run under the stainless steel protection to where an escaped rat cannot chew the line. So the only potential way for there to be a water issue is for the nozzle just to corrode and go bad, which takes a long time. It does happen, especially if you have hard water. But then they have their nozzles recessed into the tops of the tubs, where the historic model is always, it sticks kind of down through the grate, and you have to like angle the tub to push it in, which it's how all rodent racks are, but the new Freedom Breeder racks aren't like that. The standard like 10 series tub that female rats go, like one rat goes in to give birth, they've made those taller for rats. They're bigger animals. So, stuff like that. Having the ability to have completely clear or semi-clear tubs as opposed to the standard old school solid color tub, stuff like that. I think is, and that works for two different reasons. For one, it gives the rats a more natural type of light cycle. There are nocturnal animals, but their behaviors correlate to the time of day. So they have that ability if the tubs are clear. And then also, if you want to see if there are any water leaks, you don't have to open any of the tubs. It's not difficult. You look right at the rack and you see, there it is. There's a 1/4 inch of water in that tub. You fix it before a catastrophe occurs. So yeah, Freedom Breeder is really pushing the envelope, in my opinion, on the rodent racks. And then, same with the reptile racks. Like, I have a rack right to my left here from Freedom Breeder that is their FB80 model. Basically take a CB70, make each tub like 2 inches taller, have less in the rack, but now there's more headspace for these snakes, and they have windows in the front. So like, this is my favorite rack I've ever owned. It's very versatile. I can keep a lot of stuff in there for, the period of time that they can fit into that space. It's great for colubrids, for young pythons, for a lot of stuff. So, I think that the racks are not the problem. I have plenty of racks. It's the design of the racks that can be the problem at times, depending on what you're using it for.
This episode is brought to you by Freedom Breeder. Not really. Yeah, that all sounds pretty awesome. I feel that in my soul about the water lines, because I have rats outdoors that chew my rabbit lines.
Oh, shoot.
It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, you need to identify and get on that quickly, or you're going to have rabbits that don't have any water, which is not good. No, that's not good at all, especially here in Florida where it's 90 degrees. Yeah. So yeah, it's that's pretty cool. And I have had rats in the past, and that's why I don't want them anymore. How long is the typical life cycle of one of your breeder mice?
So from my experience breeding rodents at scale, the number one thing you need to do for a successful breeding operation is keep your breeding stock young. And so like they can breed for however long, but should they? Probably not. You're going to get smaller litters. They're going to be bigger, eat more food, and not raise their babies as fast, et cetera, et cetera. So like with my mice, depending on how the colony looks, it's also kind of a case by case basis, but typically I'll replace them every 5 or 6 months. Okay. And with the softwares, maybe a little longer, 6, 7, but even still, same deal.
I've thought about breeding mice, but I think I'm going to wait until I'm breeding snakes, and then I have a real
reason to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, with my my small collection, my relatively small collection of, 20 something animals, there's not really, it's not that I don't break the bank when I get my feeders,
Sure. Yeah. I feel it.
But yeah, speaking of my collection, my female Timor is like doubled in size since we last talked.
Oh yeah. Awesome.
It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. She's terrifying too. She always wants to eat. She's not aggressive at all. I can reach in there and pet her, but it's getting her out of that feed response mode that is the dangerous mode.
Yeah, for sure.
But going out and seeing Stephen Tillis, I got to see his Halmaharas scrubs, dude, and
yeah,
they are so fucking cool. They are such a cool animal.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
I mean, and you got to understand, being in Florida, I don't get to interact with scrubs
right
in general.
Yeah.
And so going to see him, I got to see, I forgot if it was Moluccans. I can't remember, but something bit right at his face, dude. Like it was 3 inches away.
Nice.
It was above him. He unzipped the enclosure. He was going in with the hook, and I think he went and did something, and this thing just went bam right out. Yeah. And it was a wild show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the Halms, do you cohab yours?
No. I mean,
no,
obviously just for breeding, but yeah, other than that, no. The biggest thing for me, I've only attempted to feed scrub pythons while they were together a few times, and every time I'm like, I'm never going to do this again. So for that reason alone, no, I don't cohab any of my scrub pythons.
Okay. What do you think makes Halmahara scrub pythons die in captivity? Because I've heard about that being a thing where they just like die. Is that just wild caught animals and, potential underlying conditions that haven't been identified, or stress? What do you think that might be? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced it for sure. I think it's just that they are, they're not as easily adaptable to captivity as some of the other scrub pythons are. But not like to an extreme degree. Like Biak scrub pythons are almost impossible to establish. There's a reason why you don't really see them in the hobby, is because they don't do well for whatever reason. They might do well for a short period of time, and then everything goes south for seemingly no reason. Halmaharas are not that way. If they're going to have issues, you're going to start with the issues. They're not going to, at least in my experience, they're not going to like slowly creep in over time. Like once the animal's doing great, you don't come in one day and you're like, what is happening with this snake? And if they do go down, it'll be more gradual as well. Everything with them is slow. They're just slow living snakes. And not that they're not capable of they have the same strike range, everything as a regular scrub python, but they're just chilling for the most part. Even if the ones that aren't particularly friendly, they wait until you engage them to engage you. Where was I? So anyway, on establishing them, I just think they're very shy snakes. They I think stress a little bit more easily than some of the other scrub pythons when they're wild caught. But there's a certain point, and other people who've kept and bred Halmahara scrubs have pointed this out as well. A switch just flips on in their brain, and they turn into a scrub python, and they don't go back.
Interesting.
Like my Halmaharas, my established animals, they're not too distinguishable from a behavior standpoint than my Barnecks or whatnot. They have some differences, but like very minuscule. There is just a moment in time where the switch flips on in their brain, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a scrub python." And up until that point, they almost have this like dead look to their eyes. They're just like glazed over. They don't really move a whole lot. They're not confident feeders. And then one day, they're standing up, they're looking at you, they're flying at their food, they're acting normal. So, and I think the biggest issue historically was that a lot of the imports back in the day were adults, and adult scrub pythons in general aren't always the best from an import standpoint, but especially Halmaharas, they're not the best. Females, especially.
Mm.
You can get big wild caught males that establish and will do just fine. Females, not. They might live. They're probably not going to breed. And if they do live, for how long? How old is that animal already? Stuff like that. So as younger individuals have started coming in, they do much better from an establishment standpoint than these older ones do. And that's how we've seen captive breeding. I'm not sure exactly on Steven's individuals where they came from and their origin story, but for the guys like Shane Adamson, Chuck Poland, who have bred them, that's what they did. They got ones that were as small as possible, and they just waited until they were ready, and then the snakes did their thing. So they don't seem to be like an impossible snake to breed. It's just that no one has actually, I don't want to say no one, it's happened, people have, but historically, for the longest time, no one had the dedication to the animals that it took to see the project through.
Mm. What would you think if I were to keep them in like a 2 by 4 by 6 foot tall?
So for me, scrub pythons, they use lateral space more than vertical space. Not that they won't use vertical space, but I think the lateral space is more important for them. You'll see them stretched out the entire length of the enclosure. Like you guys, behind me on all my podcasts, you see I have like these shelves in my enclosures. They'll be sprawled out on the shelves, basking, off the basking. You give them a 6 foot tall enclosure, they'll go right to the top for sure. But I think that the lateral space is more important than the vertical space.
Okay.
But so you said 2 by 4 base and then 6 feet tall?
Yeah.
I think that'd be wonderful. That would be like best case.
What do you think about cohabbing a pair in there?
I think you definitely can. You just have to be very careful. And then you have to have opportune feeding moments where they're far apart, or just pull one to feed them. I have so many snakes that like if I had to pull snakes to feed them, I would just never want to feed my snakes. It's such a pain in the ass. But I think you definitely can. I think Halmaharas are a better species to cohab based on some of their behaviors and just their lifestyle in general. I think Kenny has his cohabbed, if I'm not wrong. I
think he did. I can't remember.
Yeah, he'll hear this and correct me eventually. And then I think like when Chuck Poland bred his, he had multiple males and a female, and they had like connected cages that they could access each other from. So they were cohabbed technically, if you want to look at it that way. So it seems that Halmaharas, if any scrub python, would be would be more set up to thrive in a cohab scenario. It would be Halmaharas.
What would they need for an enclosure long term? Would they be okay in like a 2 by like 2 deep, 4 long, and 3 high? Would that be acceptable, or are they going to outgrow that? Would they need to go to like a 6 foot long enclosure?
Yeah, for a cohab pair permanently, I would probably say that wouldn't be quite enough.
Well, I meant, so that would be keeping them individually separated.
Oh, individually, probably so. Yeah, you probably would be good. You could definitely go bigger than that if you wanted to. But generally they're not the biggest snakes in the world. They're not small by any means. But to me, like a 9 foot Halmahara is a huge Halmahara. They can get bigger, and they have, but they don't really seem that they do all that frequently. So to me, like a 4 by 2 by 3, especially if you deck it out nicely, give them multiple layers in the enclosure to use. Yeah, I think that'd be a great enclosure for an adult.
I recently had some 2 by 4 by 2.5 foot enclosures made, and god damn, they're nice. Like just that extra 6 inches of height is insane. And then you get the vertical gradient too. So if the snake wants it real hot, I mean, like because I have all my jungles in those enclosures. Okay. And when they're in shed and they want to be hot, they're going to the highest possible point where it's like 88 degrees, 89 degrees, and they're not even directly under the light. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of value in that extra
Yeah.
vertical height.
I don't know if we talked about it on the first episode, but my adult scrub cages, most of them are 2.5 feet tall, and I love it. They're 6x2 by 2.5, and they're just like, to me, that's the like perfect scrub python enclosure, especially for my setup. And for me, I can stack them 3 high in my room and take up a lot of vertical space, so be very space efficient, and be able to work all of the enclosures, for me, what I consider safely and effectively. For someone who might not be my height, that might not work, but for me, it's fine. So
you're like 7 feet tall.
Yeah, something like that. No, yeah, I'm like 6'3", so not super tall, but not short by any means. So like for me, that's just like, man, I couldn't think of a better size for an enclosure. I always encourage people to go bigger if they want to with their scrub pythons, particularly with males. They'll do a lot of cruising. They'll use cage space. Most of the time, in my experience, even in really big cages, females will find like their few spots that they like and kind of move between their few spots. So not that you shouldn't give a female space, you definitely should. But a male is going to be all over the place in a way that, especially like during breeding season, even if a female's not around, that in a way that a female is not going to be. So,
how many? So I think the last time we talked, you had 200 scrub pythons.
Oh, no, not maybe 100 or so. Yeah, I kind of fluctuate between like 100 and 120 at any given point in time.
Okay, and that's including babies?
Yeah, that's including babies.
Okay, how many vipers do you have?
85 or so.
That's probably where I'm getting the 200 number from then.
Yeah,
and that's not even calculating in the colubrids.
Yeah, like I think right now I'm hovering around 250 with some animals that I still need to send out. So, yeah.
How do you do feeding day? Is it multiple days?
No, I cram it all into one day.
Jesus Christ.
Well, like it's the whole day. It's feeding day. Like maybe I get out and go to the gym if I have time, like while stuff's thawing, but that's feeding day. That's what I do that day. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
It's just, people have different philosophies with their feeding. People say like, if you have it regimented, it's not natural. These snakes aren't eating at a regular clip in the wild. And yeah, that's absolutely the case. I think you can accomplish that same goal by staggering weeks or something like that, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, every other week, whatever. But for me, I know that to give my animals the best care I can, make sure they're as healthy as they can be, I need a feeding day or I am going to lose it all, because the level of organization that it would take to feed at random intervals is just not something that I have the time or capacity for with this many animals. And then, I judge the animal's condition and feed it accordingly. So, I feed once a week generally. I mean, if I have to pull some feeders throughout the week, I definitely do, but I try to keep it on that weekly schedule. But like maybe a few times a year, I'm feeding everyone on the same week. Like every now and then that holy shit day happens. I'm like, oh, I got to feed 250 snakes today. Cool. But that maybe happens a couple times a year. So
how do you track that? How do you know what needs to eat on feeding day if you have that many animals?
Honestly, mostly it's just like keep track of it in my mind. My female scrubs during breeding season, I do track their meals, just like on notes on their enclosure. But then like I know with my adult males, I'm feeding them once a month. I just do like the first week of the month. That's when I feed my adult male scrub pythons. And then, so they essentially get like 9 meals a year. Then during season, I'm like, all right, these females are all eating every 3 weeks. They're all going to eat on the same week. And then all of these snakes that are raising up, they're on medium rats, are eating every other week. They have their week, and then they have the week where they don't eat. The colubrids are really easy for the most part. They're all eating once a week. Some of my bigger adult males in particular, I don't feed them all that frequently just because they're big and healthy and they don't need to. But these snakes have higher metabolisms and they just need more frequent food. All the babies for the most part are eating once a week, so that's super easy. So stuff like that. And I just I have them in groups. all the rattlesnakes. These are the ones that are on every third week. These are the ones that are on every other week. And every week I just literally walk through the collection with a note on my phone of all the different rodent sizes, go cage by cage, tub by tub. This is how many I need. And I've been doing it for a while, and it's just a system that it works for me.
Damn, that's crazy,
Yeah.
man.
So there's no 2 weeks are ever the same with what I'm using for feeders. It could never be possible.
What, do you have any boas?
I do not have one boa.
That's bananas, dude.
Kind of is.
I mean,
I've had boas. I don't have any boas.
You just had Vin Russo on and did a 7-hour podcast with him, and you didn't get a boa.
What book do you think I was glued to the next day? Oh no, I've always loved locality boas in particular. I mean, when I was probably 9 years old, there was a Reptile magazine issue published with the big centerpiece article was on Hog Island boas. It may have even been from Vin. I don't remember, but I read that article front to back probably a few hundred times. So like, and I that was like the snake that I had my ball python. I was like, all right, I want to get a Hog Island boa next. As I started to learn more about some of the infectious disease stuff with reptiles, and became a python guy, boas just scared me with IBD. Just with how merciless it is on pythons. And I'm like, if pythons are going to be my focus, I have to be really, really careful about boas. And I know that it's obviously if you are getting boas from a bad source, but like even that's one of the reasons why, or not the same reason, but a similar reason why I kind of hit the brakes on building a green tree python collection, was because when I was really heavily getting into like variety of pythons, that was when we were just learning about nidovirus, 2014, 2015, 2016. And now I know I've had to deal with nidovirus. I've tested well over 100 snakes for nidovirus. I've dealt with positives, negatives, bred positive animals. And I know that it's about as easy to manage of a virus disease in reptiles as there could possibly be. So nidovirus doesn't really scare me anymore. But back before we really knew any of this stuff and people were losing their collections left and right, I'm like, this is terrifying. And if I want, if I'm focusing on my scrubs and at the time, like olives and Papuans, white lips, like I don't want to jeopardize those by having more green trees and carpets that are coming from collections where I don't know if they're, testing wasn't as prevalent as it is now back then. I was living in my parents' house. Quarantine wasn't as easy as it is for me to do now. So some of these.
Do you have nidopositive animals that are in your collection, like separate?
I have one nidopositive green tree python that I've had for well over a decade. He's sired 2 clutches for me. I got him when I was 14 years old. He's a very, very special animal to me. He's in my bedroom, isolated. I take care of him. I shower immediately thereafter. I use gloves, yada, yada. And never been.
Does he ever have, is he ever symptomatic?
He has never had one symptom.
That's wild.
He got it from breeding with a positive female. And
really?
Luckily there was a clutch that came from it. But yeah, he's never had one nido symptom at all. He's just like the perfect male green tree. He's small, slender, healthy, super crazy feeding response. He eats like a large to jumbo mouse once a month and just lives his life. Like I don't have him on supplemental heat. He's just in my house doing his thing. You'd think, he gets cold, he gets hot. You'd think a positive animal wouldn't do well in those conditions. He does perfect.
Huh.
Yeah.
How's his IQ?
Great. It's absolutely wonderful. He scored better than me on the ACTs. He could have gone to an Ivy League. But I was like, please stay with me. I don't want to lose you for that long. So he's actually a very intelligent snake.
Oh man, that's awesome. It's I had kind of a nido scare, and I ended up sending some samples to UF and got the animals tested, and they were negative, and of course kind of went down this whole rabbit hole with Dr. Tillis and talking to him, and it's kind of like, oh, this is very prevalent.
Oh yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. And the thing is, it's most prevalent in ball pythons.
Mm-hmm.
And
And they're not even testing, I'm sure, for the most part.
yeah, trust me, I've had some conversations that have opened my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is brutal. I mean, green tree pythons got nothing on ball pythons. And like what the green tree python community has done is absolutely beautiful as far as how they've handled the nidovirus epidemic, so to speak, which is really not, but not anymore, at least. Like, a tested animal is the standard. A tested collection is the standard. Like, and if you're not living up to these standards, no one takes you seriously. And that to me is like, as the green tree python community for me exemplifies a lot of how the rest of the reptile world should carry themselves, especially in today's day and age, where there was a lot of gatekeeping in the old chondro world, and like most of to all of that is gone, especially with all the podcasts now about green tree pythons. The community is really big. People have built collections that used to keep other stuff. The exchange of information is very high. The lineage information that they keep is literally second to none in the entire reptile world. And maybe aside from like species survival plans and AZA and stuff like that, like it's at that level what they do with their record keeping. So I think we should all aspire to be a lot more like how the green tree python community carries themselves.
Yeah. I think you're good. You can, we get it. You like green tree pythons and they're very smart.
I've always said this about the green tree community. I don't think green trees are particularly smart animals as far as that goes. I love green tree pythons, but I've always thought that the community really exemplifies how a lot of us should carry ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Now you just recently went and visited Patrick Holmes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
He has nido-positive animals, correct?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And but he's got like a whole collection that's like separate.
Yeah. It's a totally isolated area with his nido animals.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing a lot more on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like on your own channel. Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that has been on my mind since I was probably like 16 years old. And I had just never done it. And I think what really kind of lit the fire under me more than anything was at the end of last year, like especially around election time, the market essentially came to a full standstill unless you had like the most desirable reptiles in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, all right, this is just me knowing that I haven't done what I need to properly market my animals. And I've always known that there's, especially in as far as venomous reptiles go, there is a very much a void of good quality content on YouTube about those animals. So I was like, this is why I got to do it. Like I either need to fully commit to what I'm doing with the reptiles, or I need to like think of a career change. And option 2 is not something that I consider. So yeah, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a video every week. And, I got to give a shout out to Brooke. She, helps me with the editing and filming and stuff like that. So if it wasn't for her, it would be a lot more difficult for me to do this. I still would, but it would, it would be a lot more long nights staying up editing a video last minute, which I've had to do. But it's part of it. So I just know how much those kinds of videos helped me when I was a new keeper. And, with the stuff that I'm working with, there really isn't anyone making a whole lot of, YouTube content about it. Dan Malari has great scrub python videos, but he's not the scrub python guy. That's a big aspect of what he does, but he's the guy who started a breeding facility over in Southeast Asia to, and he imports and does all, like, that's who Dan Malari is. He's not like the scrub python guy. He's a scrub python guy. He's one of the guys who made these animals popular in the world, but like, he doesn't make a video about scrub pythons once every other week or once a month. Like, he'll put out a few really good videos a year on scrub pythons. But if it's not for Dan, no one else is doing anything like that. So that's, I felt like a responsibility to do it as well. Very few people are putting out venomous related content that's not free handling or sensationalism. So same deal with that. Same thing with a lot of the colubrids that I keep. So I just knew I needed to do it. I needed to do it for the new keepers and for myself as well.
Nice. And how like it has been doing, how long have you been doing your podcast? Like a year, just over a year about, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
So I mean, I think we started our podcast at a very similar time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like a little over a year now, about a year and a month. I mean, I've been doing reptile podcasts for a long time, but having a show where I was the primary host, it was, when it was unfiltered, it was always with MJ or with, Forrest and MJ. And, I was never, I would ask my questions, put my 2 cents in, but I was never leading the conversation. So that was a learning curve. I don't know, as if anyone knows that, that as far as, gaining that skill set, becoming proficient with interviewing, letting people talk, but also guiding a conversation at the same time, keeping it casual, but keeping it informative. It's not as easy as it looks, but once you get the hang of it, it's a much more natural process. And like we were talking about beforehand, then becomes the challenge of having multiple guests on a show, having like a roundtable style discussion where keep it engaging, but don't, not having it be super formulaic and like, here's the question, you answer it. Okay. Now you, okay. Like, that's not very fun. Bridging the gap between that and like you are all hanging out at the bar after Tinley Park or something like that. So, but yeah, so a little over a year for my solo, sometimes with a co-host podcast. And I love it. I reptile podcasts like NPR got me through high school. And I've always liked talking. I've always been I feel like a pretty decent public speaker. I mean, I got good grades on projects just because I could present them well. I didn't do the work. I'm like, I know I could talk my way to at least a B on this, and I'm going to do it because I get reptiles I need to take care of. I can't study for this nonsense. So, it's fun. And like, I like the other week, like I got to, for the first time, talk to someone like Vin Russo in a longer form. And that doesn't just happen. You don't get access to some of these people if you're not doing something like a podcast, and so it can benefit everyone who's listening. And more than that, I mean, greatly benefit myself. Like a lot of what I've done with my breeding and whatnot, and reasons why I think I'm going to be more successful are from things I've learned from the guests on the podcast. So
Totally.
It's obviously, there's multiple reasons why I do it. I like putting the information out. I like talking to these people. And I also have so much that I want to learn from these guests that I know everyone else will benefit from too.
And do you think that has helped you with your YouTube channel? Do you think that getting in front of the camera and talking and learning and understanding, like how doing your YouTube videos, do you have like a script going into it, or are you just
no, I another thing that I just have always been good at, I can just start a sentence and find my way to finish it. Like I literally will just be like, all right, I'll press record. I'll just start talking. And I'm like, yeah, I think I got out what I needed to. So, and the one person who I witnessed do this, I'm like, you are a wizard, was Brian Barczyk. I didn't get to spend a ton of time around Brian, but definitely enough to understand how that guy's life works. He films a 20-minute, obviously rest in peace, Brian Barczyk. He filmed a 20-minute vlog a day in 5 minutes. Like, you didn't see the camera. You didn't even know what was happening. He did one take for everything. He was a machine. So seeing that, I'm like, oh, that's what the highest level of this looks like. Like, I was around other guys who were doing the YouTube videos as well, and they were very good at it, but they didn't have the reps in that Brian had. And it was a production, they and as it should be, they were taking their work very seriously. But Brian just, that was him. He knew how to make a 20-minute vlog in 20 minutes, and he did it every single day. And they were all, the results spoke for themselves as to how much that worked. So I obviously, like, I have my idea of what I want the video to be. Like, I'm showing this species of scrub python, and I have 10 individuals that I'm going to, do clips with in this video. And with this one, I'm going to explain their ontogenic color change or their adult size, or how their colors shift during breeding, their growth rates, how I feed them. These are different color and pattern differences that you see in this species. This is a really high colored animal. This is a striped animal. I feel like I don't need to prepare too much because I'm super passionate about these snakes, and like I can ramble about them very easily. So
Sure.
it's just something that comes pretty natural to me. But yeah, doing the podcast 100% helps with that. Just the more reps you have doing anything, the better you're going to get at it.
Yeah, I think we both say a lot less than we did a year ago.
The first few YouTube videos I did, I was like watching them previewing them before I put them out. I'm like, oh my God, I need to stop saying this is bad.
I know.
I like to think I've gotten at least a bit better at it, but I was watching them like, oh boy.
Hopefully. Yeah, going back and listening to my first couple episodes, there was a lot of and you just realize, like, it's funny how much you can hate yourself.
Yeah, I was lucky. Like in high school, I took like digital media classes where we were editing videos all the time, and like I just had to get used to hearing the sound of my own voice while editing something. So, like I'm fortunate where I'm not that kind of. I don't love the sound of my own voice, but I don't mind the sound of my own voice either. Like I can hear myself talk and not cringe all the time. Sometimes I do, but I'm like, just power through it. No one else is gonna hear what you just heard there or care about it. But yeah, I just got lucky that I had was forced to get used to that when I was younger and not really doing this. So by the time it came around, it was a little bit easier to handle.
Yeah, it was gnarly at first for me. And then as time went on, the thing that got me was actually seeing myself in a conversation, having a good time, smiling and laughing. I actually felt happiness for myself.
All right. It's a good way to look at it.
Where it's hey, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah.
So yeah, it's that's awesome that you're doing your thing on YouTube there, and I hope it bears a ton of fruit. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's gone a lot better than I have expected it to go as quickly. So I can't complain because like I was talking to MJ before I started it and trying to get advice, and he's like, it's going to be a grind. The algorithm is not going to pick your stuff up when you're new. Like you're gonna have to crawl to that first 1,000 subscribers. It's going to be a challenge, and it's definitely been a challenge. But honestly, it's done far better than I expected it to. So I'm super grateful for everyone who watches the videos. Yeah,
it's I remember hearing somebody say you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great.
Yeah. For sure.
And it's that kind of, just like you said, putting in the reps and grinding, like MJ said. Yeah. I just had MJ on. His episode will be on pretty soon.
Oh, cool.
Awesome. And he was saying that you have all of his scrubs, or some of his scrubs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I took his Barneck group that he had last year. And then, and honestly, so maybe I do. I have a couple. I have an older Barneck female that's in my collection that and a Halmahara male who's like my main breeder now, that I basically, we did a big trade a few years back where he got a bunch of emeralds that I had, and I got a bunch of scrubs that he had. And I think it worked out very well for both of us. So yeah, I have most of his scrub pythons. One of the males is like one of the primary male northerns he's using for his breeding. So the one that was produced by Ryan Willison, 50% Miss Willie line blood. So I like the emeralds, but I just was like, man, these scrub pythons, I need to dedicate my time to them. I'm not putting into the emeralds what I know they're going to need. MJ had been on my ass for a while about the emeralds. And I'm like, all right, I know that he's going to do with the emeralds what I want to do with the scrubs. And it worked out very well for both of us.
I think he wants scrubs back though.
He always teeter-totters on. I think Halmaharas are the ones that he's gonna jump back into at some point. And I understand why. He doesn't want to have any like huge cages in his setup, especially with all the arboreals and the tree monitors that he has. So I think like having Halmaharas instead of Barnecks will probably be better for him as far as what he wants to do with his space in the long run. So
I was kind of So I have Timors because I couldn't have reticulated pythons, right? So it's the other
Sure.
Malayo python.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I remember thinking like, well, I can't have a bar neck or, take your pick
Right.
of the scrub python. So I'll get a Halmahara.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like it'll be like scrub python light. But after seeing them in person, I'm like, no, these
they're full scrub python.
Yeah, they're full scrub python. They're epic looking. I mean, their color and pattern is absolutely incredible. So I'm glad I got to see him in person and, hold baby and then see the adults as well.
Yeah.
And just be like, okay, these, I will be very happy to have these one day.
Yeah. No, you've done something that I haven't, which is be able to hold a captive bred baby Halmahara. So,
hey, come to Florida, bro.
No, I'm coming to Florida. That's for sure. Yeah, no, they're amazing. And what people are starting to realize about them now is that they're not the drab brown and black snakes that were imported historically. Especially once you get into captive breeding, yellows, oranges, light silver coloration, like they have a much more developed color palette than most people will give them credit for. And then, not to mention any sort of like pattern aberrancies, striping that they will get. So, and I think it just takes captive breeding for some of those things that come out, like particularly the animals that Shane Adamson has been producing. Some of them are so bright yellow, you damn near need sunglasses to look at them. Like,
really,
it's ridiculous. So, I've said this, a few times, but I do believe it that I think, in 5 years, Halmaharas will be the most popular scrub python, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And that kind of fear I have of like an adult just randomly dying. Do you think that'll be a thing with captive bred babies?
Absolutely not. I mean, okay. Reptiles do weird things sometimes.
Sure.
But no, especially if you're keeping them well, you're feeding them well, you're not putting a full pest strip in their cage, you're not doing things to jeopardize that animal. Like, no, there's no reason that they're not just as hardy as any retic, ball python, carpet python, other scrub python. Yeah, they're the same.
Okay. Yeah, I want them, man. They're so cool. Yeah. The problem is the price tag. That's the thing that's like off-putting. But I guess I got, captive bred Timors from Ryan. So
yeah,
it is.
Yeah, I mean, scrub pythons used to be cheap imports, and some people. I'm not saying this is you, but by any means, some people are still stuck in that. Like, well, I used to get these for $350. It's like, well, I mean, okay, you should have gotten more, I guess. Like, that's not what they are anymore. And
yeah, absolutely.
Like, last year, there were definitely more captive bred scrub pythons in the U.S. than there were imports, without a doubt. Which is awesome. Absolutely insane to think about, considering 10 years ago, it was like there were hundreds of imports and maybe one clutch on a good year in the country. Yeah. So it's a great time for captive bred animals to become available when imports really aren't in quite as high a supply. So the legislation in Florida had a major impact on that because most of them were coming through Strictly. So now that Strictly can't get any of the amethystina stuff anymore, now, or any Florida importer for that matter, now you're not seeing nearly as many wild caughts in the market.
Are you working with the Natu?
Yeah, the tandem bars. Yeah, I am.
Nice. How many of those do you have?
I have 3 pairs.
3 pairs. Wow. I can't even fathom your collection, what it looks like. You have 100 scrubs. I can't see that in reality.
Yeah, well, it's a 2-car garage full of adult cages. And then it's this room that I'm sitting in, which is in just like an open area on the second floor of my house, which is like behind me, smaller adults that are, going to go into bigger cages, but they're breeding size now. And then, some racks with younger animals that are raising up, some smaller cages in a room downstairs that have raised up animals. So, I mean, this house is almost entirely reptiles, but still livable. It's like the
Yeah.
perfect balance. Like the two guest bedrooms upstairs are the venomous room, so like you don't even see that. You don't even necessarily see the garage. I like a little like office area downstairs. That's like the baby room essentially, and I put up like
You guys are having a baby?
no,
I'm kidding.
but like put up like heat insulating curtains on it, so like you close those off, that room kind of disappears to the house. So like most of the reptiles are visually isolated, which is kind of nice. So
yeah, you need to be able to get away from it, right?
Yeah, but I spent 5 years not living with my collection. I'll never go back to that.
Yeah.
So this is infinitely better. I think the best case scenario, and like what we talked about this on the phone one time, have a building steps away from your back door. That's how to do it.
Yeah, mine's going to be
not even down.
So I'm in my I'm going to be in my office right now, and what I want is for the building to be like 10 feet off the side of the house, so I'd walk out my front door and walk down a sidewalk, whether I have concrete poured or pavers put in, and just walk right into the building.
Yep.
But I'm kind of happy having the animals in the house.
Me too.
You know, like it's nice that my office is a snake room, and then our what used to be our formal dining area is just a wall of cages that looks fucking awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and like people appreciate it when they see it. They're like, man, that looks cool.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think I'll always have some amount of presence of the reptiles in the house. Like right now, the centerpiece of like what would be the dining room are my 4 big Spilotes cages. And I mean, they're so fun to watch. They're all over the place. They're looking at you. They're interacting with you. Like they're all cohabs. So there's 2 snakes interacting with each other, draped across all the branches and the plants, moving around all crazy. I mean, it's like I couldn't imagine the house without that centerpiece right there of the Spilotes. So but like, racks and stuff, they, those can be out in the outbuilding. But what's really nice though is like for me in Texas, you in Florida, there's never a point in time where it's the middle of the night and you're like, oh, it's so cold, I don't want to walk out to the building.
Yeah.
So, but like if I was still in Chicago or in Indiana, I don't even know if I'd want to do that some nights. So
Yeah. I mean, if I got a building, it would open me up to get like olive pythons, which I'd really like.
Yeah. For sure.
And even right now, it's kind of like I have like one sliver of wall left where I can put cages, and I'm like, this is either going to be Liasis or Halmaharas.
Yeah.
And like those are my options.
Yeah. I currently have 0 slivers of wall left. So I am done. Totally capped. Yeah. No, I mean, for me, like having a building, and it wouldn't be here. I'm in a residential area. It would just be like, I'm ready to expand, have that colubrid room or that locality boa room or whatever it may be. That would really be it. And then also eventually to keep crocodilians again. So.
Really? You want to keep crocodilians?
Oh, for sure. I love crocodilians. They're absolutely incredible. Yeah.
What do you want to keep?
Depends on what I can get my hands on. I mean, the 3 species that I'm like, these are the ones that I need to have: broad snout caiman, African dwarf crocs, Chinese alligators. They're small, they're beautiful, they're engaging, they're rare. And
Chinese alligators are adorable looking.
They're amazing. Yeah, they literally look like stuffed animal alligators.
They do.
They all have really good attitudes. Like, I can't say, but generally speaking, they're well-mannered animals. They're incredible. But like, depending on how things go, there's so many amazing crocodilian species. Yakari caiman, black caiman, any of the slender snouted species, the Gary ultimistoma.
Now, black caiman get to be huge, right?
Yeah, they're potentially the largest crocodilian in the world. Probably not quite, saltwater croc size, but they I think there have been real accounts of 18-foot long black caiman.
That's insane.
Like 15 is not uncommon for a black caiman.
And you want one of those?
In the right scenario, yeah, sure. If I was able to give him like an acre pen or more, yeah, why not? That's just like I absolutely adore crocodilians.
Do you
They're
think that one day you'll have a zoo,
yeah, I mean it's something that we all think about.
like a Thai park style, zoo?
No, I probably wouldn't want so much concrete in mine, but more like I mean like what Reptilandia has done, I think
Sure.
is amazing. But like they've done that, and I'm not competing with that, and I love those guys. So I don't,
Yeah.
it would just depend on where I want to end up, and frankly, I want to end up not too far from where they are, geographically speaking. So like, there's not really a point of doing something similar to them. Out in like central Texas, there's a lot of really cool zoological attractions. The Croc Encounter in Houston. Um, there's a bunch of world class zoos. So it would be like what would be what niche isn't filled out here from a public facility standpoint.
Hmm.
Frankly, I think something more like the Reptarium is what's needed out there, like somewhere like downtown Austin. Um, but if the right opportunity presents itself, sure. But it's not something that's like on the forefront of my mind to do. I
Yeah.
have a history in public reptile education. My first job back in Chicago is the Wildlife Discovery Center that was in the north suburbs. So like that's something like that, like a small zoological facility that lots of families come to, lots of school programs, stuff like that. It has very much a soft spot in my heart. So I
Sure.
could definitely foresee doing some sort of venture along those lines. The bigger zoological parks are fantastic, but especially seeing what again to go back to Barchek, what the Reptarium has done for that community, for the animals. I mean, it's a magical place, especially like the times when I was out there with when Brian was around, and like the amount of gravity that he had. People were like so infatuated with everything that was going on there. Like there needs to be one of these in every major city in the country. Like
Yeah.
for the sake of changing public perception of reptiles, and bringing showing kids how amazing these animals are, encouraging kids to have pet reptiles, or even young adults have pet reptiles. Like the zoos are great. Zoos don't accomplish what this place accomplishes.
Yeah.
So like I mean, Snake Discovery's done that up in St. Paul. There's plenty of people who have done that, but not enough.
Yeah. I think the difference between like at zoos, I was just talking to Dr. Tillis about this, was when he was exhibiting his animals for us, he was so passionate about it that we were so just excited to be there
Yeah,
because he was excited to have us there.
yeah,
And I was like, dude, thanks for showing us all these. And he's like, what are you kidding me? Like, I enjoy this. He probably was enjoying it more than we were,
for sure. I mean, especially if
and
you're a private keeper, like you don't get to show people your animals all the time, especially in person. So like that's a fun day, because this is the pride and joy of your life, and you want other people to appreciate it as well. Like it's a great feeling.
yeah, well, he's got 3 facilities, so he has 3 different, he has a biosecure building. He has a sort of like a pet keeper building, and then he has a commercial breeder facility. So yeah, like, and he's like required by the state to give 12 4-hour tours per year. So
Yeah, sure.
but yeah, he there was so much enjoyment coming from him that it made it that much better. You don't get that from zoos all the time.
No,
You
I
get the
mean,
people that are phoning it in because it's a job.
well, but I mean, most zoos don't even have people you can talk to
Yeah.
around. That what was so great about the Wildlife Discovery Center was there was always 1 or 2 staff or volunteers in every room. And
Mhm.
our job was, a family walks in, hey, how's it going? Just engage them right away. If they don't want a tour, you don't need to give them one. But they're asking questions, answer them, have conversations, take an animal out, show the kids, like, this is what we're here to do. And that's the same thing that they do at the Reptarium. I have to imagine at Snake Discovery, they do the same thing. that's what gets you locked in. That's what gets that passion instilled in you. I remember being a kid running around Reptile Fest in Chicago, 5, 6 years old, holding snakes, petting iguanas, petting tortoises. You know, I lived across the street from the Lincoln Park Zoo, and like over the summer, I was there multiple times a week because it's a free zoo. Walk over there with my mom or dad. But like that was great. I'll spend all day in the reptile house, but having that animal in your hand, petting that tortoise, you can't replicate that through glass. You just can't do it. It's impossible.
Yeah. What about herping? When are you going to Australia? When are you going to look at some scrub pythons?
Not a day too soon, man. I've had multiple opportunities to, like, if I put all the pieces together to make some of these kinds of trips happen, and I honestly just financially haven't been able to swing it. I don't. The rest of this year, probably no. For me, next year, like, if I don't get to Australia or Indonesia, I will have considered myself failed for the year. Seriously. For me, like, to take what I'm doing to the next level, I have to experience these animals in the wild. Like, there's no other option. I moved to this part of the country for doing that with my rattlesnakes. So like, I can't take a flight over to Indo or Australia. Like, come on, this is ridiculous. And like, I have friends who I know I could do the trips with. Like, it would be a great time too. So it needs to happen. Yeah. Next year for sure. I'm doing one of the two, if not both, but one of the two.
I just had Eric and Owen on, and that was kind of a big topic of conversation. Was what is the price breakdown? Like, how much should you expect to spend to go to Australia and for a herping adventure? And it seemed like their kind of consensus was like $2,000 to $3,000, which wasn't nearly as bad as I anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just comes down to, and obviously, I'm not speaking for them, but at least I did a similar kind of episode with Rob Stone, and they've all done all those trips together for the most part. Sure. Getting the flights at the right time, to where you're getting reasonable flights, and then like find people to stay with, and guides that want to go with you, don't necessarily need you to pay them and stuff like that. Finding the ways to, and then that makes it more fun too. If you're staying at hotels and stuff like that, sure, you're going to be with your buddies and having fun, but like staying with friends you have in that country, like that makes the entire experience more enjoyable. Like when I go to reptile shows, it's always like, I want to find a friend who I can crash with, where hang out late into the night talking reptiles and stuff like that. It's so much more fun than going back to the hotel room and eating Whataburger or something like that. So yeah, that's what makes these trips worthwhile. So yeah, I do it. I need to go to Australia. I want to see a lot of stuff in Australia, but I need to go to, I need to go to scrubland first. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah. I'm going to the Everglades with Glenn McClellan next weekend. Cool. So cool. Yeah, we're hoping to see some Burmese pythons.
Nice.
That would be dope.
Yeah. I've done very little Florida herping, primarily because most of the time I've been there, I've been with family, but took a trip there a couple of years ago. It was like unseasonably cold in, I think, like late March, early April, but we went all the way down to Flamingo and saw like an 8-9 foot American croc right like in one of like the boat slips, and we were like 2 feet away from it. Oh, it was so cool. I'm like, this is worth a 4.5 hour drive. Yeah, it was awesome.
Do you guys have alligators in Texas?
Well, not out here. Like way, way, way east towards Louisiana, technically.
Okay.
But no,
yeah.
We don't even have water out here. So.
Yeah, I've thought about going to Texas just to be able to keep more species, and
dude, Texas is the best state for reptiles in the U.S.
Yeah.
And there's not a close second. Just the climate, the laws, the community around here, everything about it is just like perfect. No, I mean, nothing's perfect, but like as close as perfect you can really get.
And you can just like keep vipers, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain like municipalities that have regulation against it, but if you're not in one of those, like there's literally nothing that's off limits. You need permits for certain things, but it's the same process as buying a hunting license. So
Yeah.
but like, yeah, like for like the injurious snakes, berms, retics, anacondas, rock pythons, you need a permit. For venomous, you need a permit. But it's a very achievable permit. So
what do you mean by achievable? Like how easy is it to get?
Go online, you buy it, and they mail it to you.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Like in Florida, it's like hundreds of hours,
Yeah. No, I mean,
venomous.
it's like a $30 permit too.
Oh my God. Yeah. I wish I could just pick up my house and my half acre and just move it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's very different from Florida out here, obviously, especially where, I mean, I'm hardly in Texas. I'm, literally as far west as you can get in the state. So, out east is, a little more Florida-like, but not really.
What do you mean? Oh, as far as like humidity and
yeah, I mean the elevation level. I mean, Houston and Brownsville area on the coast, that's not going to be obviously the elevation that you get inland, but I mean, you still get hurricanes out there, so that you could have fun with hurricanes and
yeah, I love my hurricanes. What would I do without them?
But yeah, Texas is great, and I think it'd be great if like a lot more of the reptile world kind of like converged on the state, and this became like, not that it isn't already one of the hotbeds for reptiles, but like the place to go for reptiles. And then the more of a presence there is here, the more power from like a legislative standpoint the community would have. And not that I feel like Texas is at risk for losing its liberties with reptiles, but stronger we are, the better chance of keeping it we have. So
yeah, I want to get a Burmese python. So there's 0% chance of that happening.
Yeah.
And I just want a pet. Like, I don't want to breed them or anything because I don't see a purpose in that. But
no, for sure. Yeah, Burmese is no question about it.
All right, man. Well, I think that that just about wraps up Volume 2 of Stephen Kush on The Expert and the Idiot. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Just you're working on the YouTube channel now, right?
Yeah. That's one of my main focuses. Yeah, I mean, shoot, we could probably do a 5-hour podcast if we wanted to, but but yeah, I just thank you to everyone who's been listening, everyone who supports what I do. It's much appreciated. I'm very fortunate that this is my life and I'm able to do this. So for me, it's just like doing whatever I can to, kind of appreciate that privilege that I have and, help others and do good to the animals. Just all of it's, the most important thing to me.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's awesome that you're doing it and that you've accomplished so much at your age. It still is, it's staggering. And, it's so cool that, you do put the animals first and that you care about them and care about getting good information out to people. And, and you're killing it with the podcast too. The Vin episode was fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm building an enclosure for diamond pythons to keep them outside.
Okay, cool.
And I just had that on in the garage as I was, working with all my stuff out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fantastic to be able
I cannot believe that episode was almost 4 hours long. It's the most ridiculous thing. I mean, Chris and I guess I should have been ready. Chris and I had done, like a 3.5 hour podcast on our own. So adding a third person to the mix was inevitably just going to, extend that episode. But yeah, that was up there with my favorite podcasts I've ever done.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I want to get Chris on.
Chris is the man.
Yeah. His account's pretty funny, especially his, what was it called? The, Earth Water. Did you see his post?
Oh, man.
What's his Instagram handle?
It's snake.spirit.
Yeah, so people should go check that out. Look up how to make your own earth water.
Yeah.
I think it is important, especially since we talked about water quality on this episode. if you want to see it done by the master,
Make the
you need
absolute
to.
worst water quality possible for the sake of your gut biome, and really strengthen that gut biome there. Or you're already out on one or the other. Yeah.
Oh man. All right, dude. I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me again. This was awesome.